Since Albedo said she had to put an end to some matters, he was separated from her halfway back to this place. Ainz returned to his room alone and said in a solemn tone to the maid in charge of taking care of him today. I will be reviewing the strategies the Sorcerer's Kingdom should employ in the future. Stay here and do not allow anyone else past this point. Ainz saw that the maid in charge of accompanying him had turned her gaze towards the side of the door to his room, towards the maid in charge of his room today. She was probably about to tell her, I will leave everything here to you then, I shall be the one to wait on the venerable Ainz Sama. This was how they usually operated after all. Ainz knew of this in advance, so he made a move before they could. I will have to consider things on the scale of years into the future. Any form of movement could disrupt my train of thought, do you understand? Yes. I will try my best to completely erase my presence from now on. While Ainz wanted to say that he did not mean it in that way, was this not fine too? In all honesty, the more he thought about this, the less he wanted to think about it. Good. Well then, seeing as you could not erase your presence for now, you should just stay here. Yes, Ainz-sama. The maid in charge of attending to him stayed behind in the office. Ainz himself made his way straight to his bedroom. His body was fine, but his mind was absolutely tapped out. Ainz leapt into his bed as if he was diving into a pool. The soft bed gently accepted his body. A magnificent dive. If one was to consider the hang time, the distance he had leapt, the location he landed on, the pose he was in when he landed, etc., his diving motion would garner him praise that was objectively well-deserved. This was a skill he had gained through practice and experience, because he had dove into his bed every time he was mentally exhausted. Ha! Ainz breathed a sigh of relief the same way a middle-aged man would. That sigh was beautiful too. A perfect 1,000 out of 1,000 people surveyed would say that it was truly how a middle-aged man would sigh. The reason for this was the same as before. Ainz had practiced his sighs multiple times before too. Ainz rolled around in his bed after that. Sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. He had been at the ruined capital until now, so his body was covered in dust and dirt. While he knew that it would be best for him to take a slime bath first, he did not have the mental capacity for that anymore. So tiring. Was he successful in acting as a villain? Had he dealt with that fellow in the platinum armor correctly? Although there were multiple points that warranted consideration and review, they had finally sorted out a big issue. No. This was just the first successful step in their grand scheme. One could say that things were only going to get more difficult for them from now on. With that said, however, they had gotten the mindless destruction out of the way, one of the simpler parts of the plan. What was to come were destructions on a smaller scale, in other words, precision work. What was truly troublesome was the rebuilding efforts that would come after that. Up to this point, the Sorcerer's Kingdom's territory had been tiny, excluding the Cat's Plains, yet it had giant nations as its vassals. However, things were different now. They had just gained a large amount of territory. The problems that could arise from this was obvious. Of course, the one who had her hands full with internal affairs was Albedo, but if something serious was to arise, she would definitely consult Ainz on it. The problems that could occur in the future were sure to be even more critical and difficult than they were now. He had absolutely no faith in himself that he could resolve those issues appropriately at all. Also, he could not figure out if he had messed up somewhere back then. Now, not only was there Albedo and Demiurge, the two geniuses of Nazarick around, that mentally compromised woman named Renner had also been added to Nazarick's ranks too. She had nothing to do with Yggdrasil, was purely an outsider, someone not bound by flavor text, and thus could analyze Ainz from a purely objective standpoint. What was more troubling was that her intellect was easily on par with the two geniuses of Nazarick. Could he truly act out and act well the Ainzul gown he had been building up till now in front of someone like her? I want to run away. This was the truth, the wholehearted truth from the depths of Ainz's soul. Ainz spoke like a true salaryman who had committed a major error that would probably be found out the next day he came in. I thought I had reached my limits back then. Is it not time that I let everyone know that I was a talentless hack this entire time? Have I not mentally prepared myself for this way back? But the moment I think about that moment approaching, I get scared of what kinds of reaction they would have. Would that not be enough to trigger the emotional suppression? It was as though Ainz's abilities were telling him that this was nothing to worry over at all. Ainz pondered and pondered some more to arrive at a conclusion. Alright, I'll run away. However, that was easier said than done. There was no way that leaving everything behind to run away would be acceptable. It was like if he had not handed in the documents for his replacement, yet wanted to use up all of his paid leave for a vacation a month before he resigned. That was definitely not an acceptable way to quit a job. Well, he could just say, alright, I'll run away and actually run away. He would be looked down on for that. He would need an appropriate reason for his absence. Did he not have anything at all? Ainz racked his non-existent brain. Right. An idea flashed in his mind. He had considered multiple paid leave plans in the past, but they all went to waste. If that was the case, how about he set an example for them by taking a vacation first? To be free from the shackles of Nazarick for even a little while, to hand over the work required to Albedo, would definitely be a safer bet than leaving the work to him. But there was a chance that she would say that Ainz, as the supreme leader of Nazarick, had to be included in the planning process. If she said that, I were to use the excuse that they should train to be self-sufficient, should I pass away, so this could just be a variant of that. I'll tell them that should I become incontactable, Albedo would be in charge of everything, that's the plan I'll run with. Ainz clenched his fist. It was just that. Where should I go? He could improve their relationship with the Empire and his with Jerknov by touring the Empire. Or he could investigate the mountain chain that contained the Dwarven nation. The Holy Kingdom. That's a no from me, since there's nothing of value there anyways. All sorts of dreams manifested in his mind as they grew more and more elaborate. And then, Ainz was suddenly reminded of something. How about I send those children away to make some elf friends? Aura and Mare. He had thought about this before, about whether or not he was pushing too much work onto them. Although this was well within the norm back in that world, Yamaiko had repeatedly ranted to him that their way of doing things was wrong. If that was the case, he should probably be more lenient to those children. So, what should he do? Should he take those two on a tour? That sounds nice, no, wouldn't that be an excellent plan? If I did that, it could both set an example to the floor guardians about paid leave, but it would also be an experiment to see how well Nazarick would fare without them. He had noticed the problem of the increasing workload on the floor guardians long ago. Perhaps he could figure out a solution to that problem through this. Alright. After he completes a certain amount of work, he should take those children to the Elven nation to make some friends. Ainz stood up and walked out of the room with that plan firmly set in his heart.